Industries rarely collapse because people stop believing in them. Across the United States, more than 1,200 enclosed shopping malls once stood at the center of public life, and today, nearly 1 in 4 of them is either dying or already abandoned. The irony is simple and uncomfortable. The institutions designed to bring communities together were quietly built to replace them. The man most closely associated with the modern shopping mall was an Austrian architect who arrived in America carrying 2 suitcases and an idea about cities. His name was Victor Gruen. He believed commerce could rebuild community. He had watched European town squares function as civic lungs, places where commerce, conversation, and daily life folded naturally into one another. And he wondered if the rapidly expanding suburbs of post-war America could replicate that same civic rhythm through architecture. His first enclosed mall opened in the mid-1950s, a controlled indoor environment filled with light, music, and temperature-regulated air. It was designed to feel safe. It was designed to feel permanent. It worked. Families came in waves. Teenagers found a place to gather. Retailers discovered something even more powerful than location. They discovered containment. Inside those polished corridors, customers moved slowly, predictably, and often impulsively, passing window displays designed to interrupt intention and convert wandering into spending, an arrangement that turned architecture itself into a sales strategy. The model scaled quickly, suburbs spread, developers followed, money noticed, and ambition began to outgrow the architect who had imagined it. By the early 1970s, the enclosed mall had become more than a retail concept. It had become a financial instrument, a predictable machine that developers could replicate across hundreds of American suburbs, each location promising reliable rent, stable foot traffic, and a captive consumer base. Banks financed them aggressively. Local governments welcomed them eagerly. Retail chains reorganized their entire business models around them. The numbers grew quickly. In less than 3 decades, the United States built more than 1,000 enclosed malls representing hundreds of billions of dollars in commercial real estate, a scale of wealth large enough to shape the financial stability of entire suburban tax systems. A single successful mall could generate hundreds of millions of dollars in annual retail sales, money that translated into municipal revenue, construction jobs, and pension investments tied quietly to the performance of commercial property markets. And ordinary Americans trusted the system. Parents trusted the parking lots. Teenagers trusted the food courts. Cities trusted the taxes. The mall became something larger than retail. It became suburban infrastructure. But the warning signs appeared earlier than most people remember. Foot traffic plateaued, then declined. Retail margins tightened quietly, then sharply. Executives dismissed the data. They called it seasonal fluctuation. They called it temporary consumer behavior. They called it noise. But that was only what they showed the public. In a conference room overlooking a suburban parking lot in the early 2000s, a group of retail executives reviewed a report projecting declining in-store sales across multiple national chains. The conclusion was simple. Online commerce was accelerating. The foot traffic model was weakening. The response was even simpler. Delay adaptation, protect quarterly earnings, expand anyway. And this is where the story stops being about one company. Developers continued building new malls. Retail chains continued signing long leases. Commercial lenders continued packaging mall-backed loans into financial securities. Instruments sold to pension funds and institutional investors who rarely saw the properties themselves. The machine required growth, so growth continued. Retail chains opened new stores in struggling malls. Developers borrowed against future rent projections. Banks securitized the loans. Each step produced fees. Each step deferred risk. They knew the model was weakening. They expanded it anyway. Mall construction continued even as foot traffic declined across multiple regions because the financial structure behind commercial real estate rewarded expansion first, stability later, and accountability rarely. Investors trusted the projections. Cities approved the permits. Analysts repeated the forecasts. This is where the system reveals itself. No single executive caused the collapse. The incentives aligned too perfectly. Developers earned money building. Banks earned money lending. Retail chains earned temporary growth appearing in quarterly reports. The costs would appear later. And the people who paid the price were not the people in those meetings. When the decline finally accelerated, it did not arrive gradually. Anchor stores closed first. Department stores that once drew thousands of weekly visitors began shuttering locations across the country, removing the gravitational pull that smaller retailers depended upon to survive. Vacancy spread corridor by corridor. Rent concessions followed. Property values dropped. Developers refinanced aggressively. Banks extended terms. Investors waited. Then the closures multiplied. National chains collapsed. Toy retailers vanished. Electronics giants disappeared. The corridors emptied. Mall by mall, state by state. And the most devastating detail rarely appeared in headlines. For decades, commercial mortgage securities tied to mall properties had been quietly distributed across pension funds, retirement accounts, and municipal investment portfolios, spreading the financial exposure across millions of ordinary workers who never set foot inside the boardrooms that approved the deals. They own the risk. Containment failed quickly. Bankrupt retailers, abandoned leases, property owners defaulted, cities lost tax revenue, parking lots emptied, and the official explanations remained careful. Executives blamed changing consumer preferences, analysts blamed technology, developers blamed timing, but the structure itself remained mostly unexamined. Because the system had functioned exactly as designed, it transferred risk downward, and the public discovered the consequences gradually by reading about it. In a small Midwestern suburb, a father who had worked maintenance inside a mall for 20 years arrived for his shift one morning and found the security gate closed. A printed notice explained that the property had entered restructuring. His pension depended on the job. The pension fund depended on real estate investments. The real estate investments depended on rent. The rent had vanished. Across the country, a small retailer who had leased a storefront for decades watched foot traffic disappear week by week, until closing the shop became less a decision and more a surrender. The lease remained, the debt remained, the customers did not. A teenager who once spent Saturday afternoons wandering bright corridors now drives past an empty building surrounded by cracked asphalt and fading signage. The building still stands. The lights do not. Communities built routines around these places: first jobs, weekend traditions, meeting points, quiet rituals of ordinary life. And when the machine that sustained them collapsed, the silence arrived slowly, store by store, hallway by hallway, until the echoes replaced the music. Nobody sent them a memo. Nobody asked for their vote. History has seen this pattern before. Railroad booms collapsed into bankruptcies across 19th century America. Industrial towns built around steel mills closed quietly once the economics shifted. Each one began as progress. If you enjoy stories about the turning points that reshape industries and communities, subscribe. New inflection points every week. Because when systems reward expansion more than stability, the ending is rarely dramatic, just empty buildings.